question: do dried herbs lose their potency over time? And if so, how long? Yes, dried herbs definitely lose their potency to varying degrees over time. Some herbs hold their potency for quite a long time. Other herbs lose their potency significantly, like kind of quickly. And you really have to assess the different plants and how they last individually. What I tend to do is, look at the herb and like, does it still look the green color that it was when I first had it dried out and everything? I crush up and smell the herb. If it's supposed to be an aromatic herb, is it still aromatic? Is the scent that it had when it was fresh or freshly dried still prominent? If it was astringent, can I still, if I taste it, feel that astringency? If it's bitter, supposed to be bitter, is it still taste bitter? If it's demulcent, does it still get slimy when you mix it with water? That's a lot of what I use. It would be considered organoleptic assessment, using your senses to assess herb potency. And if you think about like herbs that last longer and herbs that don't last as long, if you have dried basil, we know that like right when you dry basil, it's like really pretty incredible. And then like over time, it just loses some of its basally aromatics. And if you compare that to like dried oregano, I'm using this example because it just recently happened to me, is I ran out of oregano and I was making pizza sauce. And I was like, well, I really want oregano in my pizza sauce. So I went rummaging through the spice cupboard and like way in the back in an unlabeled bag, which is not a great thing, by the way. You should always label your bags of herbs. There was like some not very green looking herb, and I didn't know what it was, but I thought like, it looks kind of like dried oregano looks. And I grabbed a pinch and I crushed it up and it smelled like oregano, and I tasted it and it was like, tasted really like oregano. I have no idea. That dried bag of herb from a food co-op somewhere has to be like years and years and years and years and years and years old. And it still was, it had all of the oregano-iness that I wanted for my pizza sauce. Had it been basil that was that old, I don't think it would have been spectacular. So use your sentences, make that assessment. There's another thing that I started doing, is I used to go through my herbs my jars of herbs, dried herbs, every year or two, and basically be like, oh, this is from that time, and that's too old, and I'm going to get rid of it, or like, oh, this one's like 6 years old, I should get rid of that. And I don't do that anymore. What I do is I open this stuff up and I taste it and smell it, and if there is something that I'm like, yeah, this ground ivy sure has lost a lot of its aromatics. Ground ivy is a plant that doesn't hold its aromatics a terribly long time after you dry it. Rather than getting rid of it, I'll be like, I need to harvest more ground ivy. And I will get rid of the old ground ivy when I harvest new ground ivy, because there has been some occasions where I've thought to myself like, oh, I got rid of that ground ivy like 2.5 months ago, and now it's just like, it's really the thing that I wish that I had. And even though it wasn't like the greatest quality that I would have hoped for, I would rather have like had some to try out than having none to use. So I will get rid of stuff as I replace it, and I will taste and smell to figure out what I need to harvest to replace something.